Okay, the task that Ger has actually put before us are four key questions to that. The first one is a short introduction as to what changes were introduced during the COVID period. Secondly, how do you think this has changed the classroom situation with IT? Thirdly, will some things used during COVID remain in place going forward? Four, has the student or teacher attitudes to IT use changed, etc.? There are two key words in those four questions that I think we're missing. Tell me what those two key words are. Don't everyone jump in at once. It's actually up there. It's there on the left-hand side. Teaching and learning. The effects of COVID on teaching and learning is crucial. That's actually what we're looking at. It's not so much the classroom, the physical classroom and so on. It's what actually happens in the classroom, or what had happened in the classroom. But as we well know, as for instance in our experience, there wasn't a classroom as such. It was a virtual situation. And another thing I think is slightly sort of askew with the questions there is not so much looking forward, but looking back as well. Because you can't understand the future if you haven't known what has taken place. And I think for each and every one of us here, we're all from different countries. We've all had different experiences in terms of COVID and so on, and still having that. But I think that countries handle things differently. We can be critical of certain things that would happen within our own situation, as in Ireland. We could look at further afield in other countries and say, aha, they did worse than we did, or that crew did better than we did. So I think we need to look at what we actually did do. And from our perspective in Ireland, I think we need to actually look at that a little bit closer before we move forward. So that's where I want to sort of work towards. I'll go backwards, then I'll look forward and see, look, are there conclusions we can actually make out of this? Because I don't think you'll understand our situation if I don't sort of explain what happened to us in that period of 18 months, which was in many, many ways horrific for all of us, and it's still going on, but it's there. So essentially what I'm going to do is actually look a bit closer at the St. John's experience in terms of how we market, how we see our students, in terms of what they experience. Our ETB, our education body, maintain that all our colleges should be giving the experience to students, the same experience to students all over. Whether it's College A down the road, College B, College C, College D. I'm firmly of belief that you may be giving the same package, but the actual experience in each school, in each college, is actually different. And not only is it different in each education body, nationally, but internationally as well in terms of the experience there. So therefore, has this experience changed due to COVID-19? That's the key question we're going to ask, and ask in terms of St. John's and so on. Now, for us, our experience started on March 27th for the first lockdown to May the 20th to the 18th. We were there on the 25th, 26th, and we said, oh, we'll get to Easter before we get to lockdown. But on the 27th, we were literally just, boom. The hatch came down, and we literally went online. Now, were we prepared for that? Absolutely not. Our system works slowly. So we were prepared, but in terms of, was it 100% prepared? Absolutely not. No way. But did we cope? Absolutely cope. And that's the key there. We did cope. But we coped We coped within a crisis situation. You hear all of these things about crisis management and so on, put in place, and you see all these ideas. And generally, if you're actually at any of these meetings, you sort of nod off and say, oh, that's never going to happen. But lo and behold, the hatch came down, and we were in a lockdown situation, you go online. So in that preparedness, certainly we were not prepared for the first lockdown. Now we went into, if you reflect back, see the dates, May, we came into summer and we said, oh, we're going to open up and have a summer. That's what did happen within certain sort of conditions and criteria and restrictions and everything else. We did have a summer that summer. I can always remember going away up to the Aran Islands on the west coast of Ireland and so on and so forth myself. And we had a summer. And we started back in college after that in right up to October, if you see it there. In other words, we got the college moving again. But within a month, with us, we're a further education college. And I think that's, again, different to a lot of the schools here. And it's different to the profile. And I'll talk a little bit about that because our profile is mature. In other words, what the experts were telling us about younger children, primary school children, post-primary school children, and further education students or higher education students, they're at different age levels and are more prone to getting COVID and so on. So the restrictions that they would have and would have to put in place would be different, and it was different for us, very, very different. So I talk about sort of the restrictions that were put in place for us and what sort of impeded our moving forward and our experience. But if you actually go back to the second lockdown again, that's October the 21st to the 1st of December. So we got the college going, we got our recruitment in, we got the students in, and they had experience for 4 weeks of college, which was fantastic in its own way. At least we saw them eyeball to eyeball, we could see them, we could see them from head to toe and say, right, you're John, you're Mary, whatever, So we had that, and the students had that. But again, we were in lockdown right up until December. Of course, we came to December, and our politicians, and we all were saying, I wouldn't say we sort of put any blame on it, we said we must have a Christmas. Remember that Christmas? We said we must have a Christmas. We have to go out and have the experience. And that's what we did do. We had Christmas. Lo and behold, for us, it was the worst thing we did. Because immediately, what happened was, we came into the third lockdown. And a third lockdown which was extremely long, extremely tight, and that was the corrosive one for a lot of students and a lot of staff and so on. But the only thing is that we learned from the past, and we were probably far, far more prepared at that stage for that lockdown in terms of preparation with IT and to be online and everything else. Those sort of situations which we were learning in the first lockdown came into place. So we were more experienced, and I come back to the St. John's experience. Certainly we would say, look, we want the students as well prepared and equipped and, not isolated and everything else in terms of what they did. So therefore, by the time we came to the third lockdown, certainly we were far, far more prepared for that. Moving on. Just general statements about blending as regards say being online and so on. I just wanted to throw them out, right? In most cases, core educational elements ranging from basic teaching and learning, student assessments and curriculum design have been re-evaluated and in some cases reinvented. A lot of our courses, we're mature, we work from you take it down off the shelf, this is a course and so on, you deliver and all the criteria are there and so on and so forth. They had to be changed and moved around and so on to suit the needs, if you like. So the blended learning came into place. The only thing is that a lot of our courses, and in fact all of our courses, have a practical element. It's not theory, it's not chalk and talk, writing the board and talking. Most of our courses have 20, 30, 40% practical elements into the course. So it's far, far more difficult for the likes of us to go entirely online. But again, we manage that, I think, can be a conclusion for Guy. Of course, the shift to online was not without its problems. Not everyone has access to high-speed broadband or to a computer with a powerful processor, and not all courses were suited to online delivery. And I think that will come out again and again in what I say as regards our students and the experience that they would have had. Campus closures also threw the social and economic issues facing students into sharp relief. They ranged from concerns about student debt, didn't have enough money, couldn't buy a laptop, couldn't buy software. Rent, fees, digital access, the loss of social interaction and mental health. And I think maybe the last thing about the social interaction came hugely into play. You can give a laptop to a student, you can give the software, you can give all the equipment, but really the real thing is being in isolation, and I think we all felt that to some extent. Remote teaching forced by a public health emergency is not at all the same as a dedicated remote or blended learning model, where the course is designed and with an entirely new type of delivery model in mind, and where students are likely to expect consistency and coherence when it comes to course design. In other words, you sign up for a package: musical instrument making, film, digital media, animal care. Animal care, you expect to be working with dogs and animals. You don't expect to be online and looking at an animal through a screen. You don't expect to be on a musical instrument making course and finding that the guitar you want to make, that piece that you wanted to be finished with after a year or 2 years or whatever, is now in your flat or at home, and you're trying to make that on your own, again through a screen by being instructed. It's very, very difficult. While emergency remote teaching would have been a very useful learning process for many teachers, the unintended consequences of such a rapid transition led to concerns that some courses could fail to meet the expectations that students had set at the outset of the course. Take our work experience program, which is a mandatory module with us. Students have to go out to a relevant work experience. How could you put that online? We put another module in place, a PPD module, personal development module. It's not the same thing. It's an excuse to be doing work experience. So therefore, are you getting the same thing? No, of course you're not. But we did our best to try and give a simulated version of that, an online version, if you like. So the changes that were done to courses, to the curriculum, were huge, but we had to make do, if you like, within that pandemic situation. So the features that were there, and I think these are the things that matter hugely to us, is the 2-meter social distancing, because that's what we were working to. My own son and sister are working in post-primary. We're in further education, sure, and so on. So in post-primary, secondary, whichever term you use within your own country. We were working 2 meters with us. Post-primary in Ireland were working to 1 meter. But how could you keep 1 meter distance with a group of 30 kids in a classroom? Impossible. And they're wearing masks throughout the day, from one end of the day to the next. Kids congregate, they mix, they talk. What they want to do is interact. So that's 1 meter social distancing really was not there. Largely speaking, they tried it, but as time went on, it became far and far more difficult. With primary school kids, they went into their pods, and that probably was more controlled, if you like. You keep them in pods of 8, 10, or whatever in a pod. Lived on-site student experience. Our students came on site at various times during the last 18 months for different times, maybe towards the assessment time, where they had to get in to actually do the work, where they had to complete their modules and do the practical work. So in small groups, they came in to go on machinery, on whatever, and so on and so forth, to actually do the work. During the hard lockdown times, that wasn't the case. Blended learning was the order of the day. That was what was common to us all. Totally online was totally there as well, especially during that January right through to May on the third lockdown was totally online. The agony and the ecstasy of assessment, God, for us teachers that was a huge, not to mention for the students involved. It's hard enough to do an examination, come in and sit down for 2 hours or whatever and do an examination. But if you're not sure how how your module is going to be examined, then that puts extra fear and pressures on you, but also on the teachers, in terms of how you can actually cope with it in that. Change a practical, something practical into an assignment, and to make sure that you're actually covering everything. It's difficult, to say the least. I just want to give you a feel of where we were in terms of, say the things we actually did and sort of opening up and so on. This was a video. Does it look familiar? The reason I played that as well was because I think it gives you an idea of the type of courses we do in St. John's. It gives a very, very broad range. But that was one of the videos we produced in the first lockdown. I think it gives a very, very good idea of the sort of restrictions and guidelines we put in place for all of our students and so on. Now, one thing that affected us hugely was our enrollments into the college. If you go back to 2019 there, in phase one, in terms of enrollments, and this is before the intake would be before the lockdown, before COVID, we were at 849 students. But by the time we came to the second phase, because of social distancing, 2 meters, we literally could only bring in half the number of students into courses. So in other words, if you had a course group of, say, 24 in an IT room, an information technology room, we could only bring in 12 students. So we had waiting lists in all our courses, right across the college. So we had an intake of 602 students that year. Now, the question that is being asked here is what impact has COVID upon the likes of us? And I would say hugely still. Because this year, in the third phase, despite working to full enrollments, in other words, we were saying we're taking in not 12 but 24 into all our groups. That didn't happen in terms of what happened in reality. We only have gone up to a further 700 students within that. So in other words, there's an awful lot of hesitancy still out there with people of getting into groups and so on. There are other factors as well. There are a lot of people on payments still in Ireland and so on. So they why would they want to come off a payment of 300 and something euro to do a full-time course and maybe go on social welfare or whatever? And going from one payment to the next doesn't work easily. So there's that element. There are other elements as well in terms of people's attitudes and what they want out of life has changed. But essentially, we're still only increasing gradually. And I think that's going to be one of the effects for the next few years in the sense of the changes that are going to come back. It's going to come back slowly. And I think you can actually say that readily, if you like. Moving on. Now, the student experience. We were adamant to actually see how our students were affected. And we did a survey of student experience in December of 2020 of our students. Now, I hope you can read that. It's a bit small, but I just read some of the comments that were made by students, and I took a snapshot of what came in from students. And this, literally what I did was, it came in an Excel file, all the comments, and I just picked 7 students. I didn't, as it were, pick these students at random. I took a slice of that Excel file and said, right, this is probably indicative of what's happening throughout. Now, if you go across the lines here, that's student 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, okay? And the comments they're making is regards to the general experience that they would have had, and our pastoral care people, our guidance and so on, wanted questions like, how were students taking care of themselves? 1, 2, 3, do you understand? And they put in comments. And then the difficulty going with students. Let's see what students were saying. And again, it's not my selection, I'm just taking a snapshot. Student number 1 found it very difficult to get assignments done on time. Ringing friends and family, enjoying hobbies, interests, going for walks, getting things done in time. Everything feels like it takes forever. Student number 2. It works best for me if I had remote experience from March last. I was prepared for the new college year. Remember now, this is the first lockdown. Yes, it was tough to keep on track, but all my tutors and peers were always available. I found when I did have to attend classes, I was very anxious and preferred to stay remote. This person's getting very comfortable. Getting used to it. Taking breaks as often as I could, walk the dog, kept in contact with my classmates, trying to do the work. Finances were an issue. And this comes up for our students again and again, how to cope financially. Student number 3, stressful. It took weeks for the teacher to set me into a routine, and the emails were coming in at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and even midnight about Zoom invitations for the following day. So in other words, teachers were working right into the evening, into the night time, sending out invitations. And of course, that adds to stress with students. There's one thing we say about staff, you shouldn't be contacting staff at their off time and so on. But I think in that pandemic situation, they got hacked up, if you like. So in other words, staying in touch with family, this is how this student found friends by technology exercise. Isolation, loneliness, uncertainty, not knowing what will happen,
with how the course is delivered and how well trained I will be at the end of the year. Student number 4. The support and guidance has gotten started this college year with staff and tutors, but one thing generally missed is library to print and to do my course work that a lot of stress bring home every day. So again, missing the physical things like the library. Like the days when a student would say, I miss the library, I miss the books, you know. But that's what was happening. Sleeping, eating healthy, or organising for the next day. The workload of not having a printer or a library, not having a seating area for lunch. We took all the seating right throughout the college out because of the instructions we were told. So students had nowhere to sit around the college. We had some lovely furniture and so on. It was all put into storage. But lo and behold, if you actually had to eat a sandwich or whatever, you sat on the floor. You know? We found that we left tables aside in the canteen and spaced out. Of course, what do students do? You all gather into one spot. That's the nature of the beast, if you like. That's what we do ourselves, you know? We gather. We're social animals. That's the way we interact. But again, we had to put the tables out just to make sure that we weren't congregated, because we didn't want groupings, if you like. Student number 5. This period has a very smooth learning experience, taking into account the current pandemic, staying home, taking short walks between classes, being able to make a good work plan because I've always been home, being able to work between classes if needed, waking up for class, the bed, the laptop, no distance, don't have to go out and walk, don't have to, there's no set routine. And I think that's telling you a lot. So time, one day runs into the next. We found that as a staff. One day ran into the next, if you like. 1 week ran into the next. It all seemed the sameness. I thought that college managed everything well, given the circumstances. The Joy College online as commuting is difficult for me, but also glad to be back in class. Reading in stress, taking time away from assignments, taking days off, keeping my college work organised, relieves stress. Do you notice the word stress is coming in again and again? And this is the experience. And I think it's crucial that these terms are coming out. Isolation, stress, being on your own. How can you understand the future if you don't understand the past in terms of how students have experienced all of this? Moving on, and I think I'll just move on to the techno stress. As regards teaching and learning, this is what they say about things in terms of general statements. The ESRI, the Economic Social Research Institute in Ireland, they research things. What they say, it surveys school leaders on their experience of addressing the challenges arising from the sudden switch to remote learning. This research highlighted the ability of schools to adapt was impacted by the school's prior adoption of technology and the level of access to digital technologies and broadband availability in their catchment areas. In Ireland, we're only at the beginnings of broadband nationally. In other words, you could be at home with no Wi-Fi. You could be out in the middle of whatever and having fantastic broadband, but down the road, there's nothing at all. So those differences are hugely important, and the ability to actually manage within those for the teachers and students and management is very, very important. Techno-stress, this is what they call it. Psychologist Craig Broad defined it as the inability to adapt or cope with new computer technologies in a healthy manner, pointing to difficulty in accepting technology and over-identification with technology as key concerns. Events over the past year have led to additional stress for educational stakeholders in working and learning remotely during the pandemic. Teachers reported increased workloads within the online environment. They were spending far, far more time online and preparing and so on and so forth. Of course, people don't understand that. The media don't understand that. They say, oh, the teachers were having a great holiday. No, fantastic. To me, there was no holiday at all. Techno-stress was reported across a wide range of experience with particular reference to upskilling. And again, That's the experience of teachers, the experience of students, with regards to technical stress. An in-depth analysis here is obviously needed, and that's actually what's happening now. They're looking back at the experience that people had. You can have all the perceptions you like and make comments that are, thinking that this is real and come up with your own conclusions. But what you do need is an in-depth analysis of what has taken place. And that's what's happening now in Ireland, actually. Moving on. Sorry. Let's look at other effects of COVID-19 on the college experience. One thing that we have, and I'm looking at various things within the college itself, in terms of how we do things. We always, in the past, would have actually interviewed our students face to face. It's great to see a person from head to toe and getting to see, look, is this student right for the course? If the student isn't right for the course, we redirect and so on. It's not to try and catch you out, it's to try and redirect. So we always have face-to-face interviews. Now, all applicants are interviewed, but of course, what happened with us was that in the first lockdown, we did actually manage to have social distancing and face-to-face interviews. But in the second lockdown, the hard one, we went entirely online with Zoom interviews. Because that's Zoom, the camera. Graduation. Our graduation was normally held in our city hall. We couldn't have it at all. What we did was an online version, if you like. And this is actually what's going to happen shortly as well. We have an online version of this. Now, Miriam would know this well because she actually did a lot of work on this for us, where we actually took our students' work and we put it online, and it was the graduation and so on and so forth. This was what we managed in 2020. We are changing this year to a full virtual version of graduation, if you like. But here you can see that we had all the work of the students up here, and we presented then. I won't actually play into that, I'll just move on to the moment. But essentially what we did is that we actually presented our works of the students right up there for graduation and so on. Moving on, open days all went virtual as well. And again, they're all on our websites and so on and so forth. You'll actually see those up there. The college exhibition went online. All the student work was actually presented up there as well. So if you can actually, we'll be sending this out afterwards, you can actually go in and see the student work within that as well. Moving on to other areas. Now, in terms of what's going to happen for the future, I said there's going to be research going to be done, and that is what's going to happen here. And this next steps project in terms of the research, in terms of what has happened with the experience of teachers and so on and so forth. And that is supposed to be coming out, that in-depth analysis is supposed to be out next month, okay, in Ireland. So we get started a very, very good overview of what has taken place. Moving on to the teaching and learning again, and that's back to where we started. In conclusion, now what conclusion can you make as regards to the questions that were being posed? I don't think you can make ultimate conclusions at the moment. I think we've got to wait for the research and see, look, what were the actual effects there, what things will stay with us and so on and so forth. I have a fear that we may actually go back to 2019 and almost go back to entirely things that we were actually done. But at the same time, I think we have a vast amount of experience that has taken place during that 18 months that will stick with us. The online stuff, our teachers and students have come 5 years forward to where they were back then. So an awful lot has happened. But how much of this will stick into the future is the question. I fear that maybe there might be some vested interest that will say, oh no, don't move forward. But that is retrospect. It's retrograde. You cannot do that. We have to take the experience and the good parts of it and moving forward. And hopefully, by the research that is being done now, we take the good bits and do move forward. So therefore, has the teacher-student experience attitude to IT use changed? I think it has. But will it actually move forward, be used for the benefit of us all in the future? Yes and no, I think. But again, we wait for the analysis and research. Okay? So therefore, just finishing up, Gurad Mahmud in Irish, thank you in English, and in Turkish, please. Thank you very much.